Well, good morning, everybody. Here's my plan for today's forecast video. I want to talk a bit about the recent trends we've seen here during the summer, and I'm going to compare them to some historical trends. And I'm going to talk specifically about the North Pacific Ocean. We're then going to walk again through the models, which continue to be quite consistent, both the temperature and the precipitation forecast. We'll discuss again what the Pacific High is doing, what the Bermuda High is doing, and tucked in the middle, the Four Corners Ridge. We'll then walk this out a little bit longer range at the very end by comparing the new CPC update, which came out yesterday morning, to the European weeklies, and we'll also look at the long-range CPC forecast as well. So with that, let's just get started with this map here you've been looking at, which is the June 1st to July 18th precipitation ranks. Now, we've had a lot of discussion about how stormy a corridor we've had in through these two lines, and the dryness that has been over parts of the southeast into the Appalachian Mountains, mainly due to a lack of flow, not necessarily due to some big, massive ridge that sat in this area. In fact, we've been able to get storms across parts of the southeast. I drove through some of them last night. I'm coming to you from Macon. And by the way, I know I'm late this morning. We had massive problems trying to just get connected to the internet, and several of my favorite sites are broken and not working, and I tried to figure out why, and it seems like something's going on nationally with some computer issues, so I apologize for that. Hopefully this will upload here shortly to YouTube without trouble. But what I want to focus on is what's been going on in the West, because as you take note here, we've got pockets throughout the West that have gotten very, very dry this summer. And while we've had deeper convection that at times has put down some big storms that have rolled around the big Four Corners Ridge, on the broader scale of things, more places have been missed than hit by some of these bigger storms. And that's why we've seen some very dry conditions, and at the same time very hot conditions in the West. So again, June 1st through July the 18th, just looking at temperature ranks. And we've kind of painted the corners here with a lot of heat. The southwest and the northeast, but also down into the southeast has been quite hot, with more often than not cooler weather coming in between here, coming out of the Canadian prairie into the northern plains of the United States, like we're certainly seeing right now, that's sunk all the way into the Midwest and getting into the Mid-South too. So given that pattern, let's take a look at the newest drought data. This was just released. Again, we're at about 50% of the lower 48 in some form of drought. That starts from abnormally dry, that category, all the way up to exceptional. And again, we can really see the degradation in the drought here in the Appalachian Mountains and surrounding states, but also in the Pacific Northwest, where the change has been on the negative side. So if we just think about summer, we're 6 weeks into our summer pattern here. We can see that while we've had some improvement in Mexico, getting into Kansas, clipping the panhandles with respect to their drought, major drought improvement in southern Florida. This was largely due to a couple of very large rainfall events lately and a lot of scattered convection. We can see the dryness here and the expansion of the drought that's been in the Northwest. And I focused a lot on this lately, so I wanted to kind of turn my attention to the other side of the country today as we think this through. Okay, so what's the pattern been doing? This has been what summer has given us. There's been ridging here south of this part of the Aleutian Islands. The Gulf of Alaska's had some troughing. There's been a ridge that's built this summer in the west and come back repeatedly. That's driven flow out of the northwest here through parts of the Canadian prairie into the Midwestern United States. And then we've seen our Bermuda High really open up and become quite strong here. It's got more of a northward bias, but that's currently where it's sitting. And I've been questioning whether or not this pattern's going to come back, this kind of Pacific High setup that you see here. And then, sorry, my mic just fell over. I'm recording my truck, so I'm balancing everything on my knee here. There we go. So what's going to happen with the Pacific High, the Four Corners Ridge, and the big Bermuda High? We're going to talk about all of those things here coming up. The one thing I do take note of is that looking at the European weeklies, the Pacific North American pattern, that's a pattern where when it's positive, there's West Coast ridging. When there's negative, there's West Coast troughing. And what is really important about the timing of this is that going through the next, several days, we're going to have a large West Coast ridge that bottoms out toward the end of the month. And I'm very curious about this for two reasons. This drop in the P&A will signal troughing coming into the Northwest. When? Maybe starting around the 24th, 25th, 26th. What is also curious about that time period is that may be when the tropics start to get going. And if the tropics get going when there is some sort of trough that comes into the west, that could actually be important for guiding a system maybe toward the Gulf of Mexico or toward the East Coast, should one form in the Atlantic. We're going to talk about that in a few moments. But take note, as you go back into August, what do we see again? We see the PNA popping back up again, with the control run really taking a big ridge back into the western United States. And if we continue to put ridges in the west, you get northwest flow in the Midwest, and that's going to run into moisture coming around the Gulf of Mexico and out of the Atlantic from the Bermuda High. And so that's what I'm questioning here as we look at all of this. So I wanted to know some bigger picture things, and I hope you find this interesting. So I went back and I looked over the time period of 1990 to 2023. And I averaged over that time period height anomalies, so ridges and troughs. And what was interesting about this was that from that time period, comparing it to the historical numbers, we actually saw more large ridging in the western United States and western Canada, with more troughing somewhere in the Bering Sea, a ridge that also sat somewhere in the North Atlantic, while over the Canadian archipelago north of the Hudson Bay there was some troughing. So if you just said what has happened more often than not in summer since 1990, we would say that we've had midsummer ridging in the western United States. That is all that this graphic is telling us. But I was thinking more about what this has done, and maybe what the relationship has been with the ocean temperatures, because we know that the ocean and atmosphere are a coupled system. They work together. And what's interesting is that during that time frame, if you compare the ocean temperatures to their averages, we've been much, much warmer than average across the North Pacific through this area. Now you're going, wait a minute, these are small values, but small anomalies of large quantities of water is a tremendous amount of energy. I mean, we probably measure it in exajoules. It's a lot of energy that's being stored in this upper ocean heat. And I want to think about what that might mean now and just into the future. So I did this. I went to NOAA's website, which gives you the basin time series of the vertical mean temperature anomaly. So what does that mean? This is over a long extended time period, 1955 to 2023. We're going to look down at different depths. That's what vertical means here, of course. And then we're going to look at the averages. So I went after, in the Pacific, specifically the North Pacific, the top 100 meters and the top 700 meters. And I wanted to see what the ocean heat content has looked like. This is specific to the North Pacific, okay? Specific to the North. So it's right here. This spot is what I'm looking at. And so when you graph that out, you end up getting this. In the red color, that would be the North Pacific down to 700 meters. And honestly, since the 1950s, 60s, and 70s, we have been seeing an increase in those ocean temperatures. And this, again, is just one spot on the planet. But in the top 100 meters, the increase has been much more prevalent, right? You can see a much larger increase in this over time. And so I'm thinking, is that influencing where this ridge has been? If we just pump all this heat into the lower atmosphere off of the ocean, is it just shoving the jet farther to the north more often than not in the middle of summer, June to August, making ridging live in this spot? Because if we put ridging up the west coast, the flow goes over the top and it cascades down like this. If you have a ridge in the North Atlantic, that keeps the Bermuda High open, which means we keep moisture coming in off of the Gulf. So if we end up getting, like I said, more ridging here and that flow comes through, does this increase the chances of just being more storm clusters rolling over northwest flow, pumping into moisture that's been coming out of the Gulf of Mexico? Because certainly that's been the case this year. Look where our cooler water is. Look where the heat has been here, and also in the North Atlantic. And we've detailed this many times, what the pattern's done. And if you just look back over the last 60 days, while the west has gone extremely hot and dry, we have several areas in through here that have stayed not just wet, but excessively wet. And this extends into the Canadian prairie as well. And over the last 30 days, we can really start to see some of these numbers stand out. Now, you know that in the near term, we've got some very good news in terms of the moisture returning to this drier pocket that runs from the Delta all the way into parts of the Northeast and along the Appalachian Mountains, and also down here to Texas as well. But in terms of the heat stress that's going to stay in the west, I think we're going to get a little bit of a reprieve when the PNA drops, but when it bumps back up there in August, I think it's going to get hot in the western United States again. So I've really been thinking hard on this, and I want to just kind of bring it to a last couple of slides here to think this through. Yesterday's satellite data, very active southwest monsoon. This is the cooler, drier air that's driving down into this front, which produced quite a bit of convection down here in the southeast and some locally heavy rain. But at the end of the day, as the sun was setting, the wildfire smoke was quite evident. A lot of it is coming from western U.S. wildfires, which again, just you can see them in northern California, parts of Oregon, Washington, the smoke coming into Montana, both from the west and from Alberta and Saskatchewan and northern British Columbia here. But just amazing to see this, plus this little low that curled up right on the U.S.-Canada border the other day, producing some deep convection in this area. From there, I do want to show you the fires that are in Canada. This is the sun rising this morning, so let me take you back to yesterday. There we go. Take a look at northern Alberta. Deep, these are huge forest fires happening well north of where we do a lot of our agriculture, of course, and through this corridor. But this wildfire smoke is extremely thick and it's going to continue to spread toward the south and east. Now, coming back only to the United States, I did want to bring you up to speed on the current acreage burned. We're at 3.1 million. Last year, we were almost at 800,000. Interestingly enough, we've had fewer fires than a year ago up to this point, but the fires this year have been much, much larger. You can also compare this to historical years, and at the bottom, the 10-year average. So the 10-year average would be about 2.9 million acres. We're at 3.1, so that's very close to the 10-year average on forest fires. From there, though, I want to show you the latest update on the California reservoir situation. And what's interesting is, despite all the heat and the high demand from really high evaporation rates in the west, the reservoirs are still, take a look at the red numbers, at or above their historic averages for most of the reservoirs. So there's still plenty of water from last year's snowpack and even the year before it, making sure that this is going to be a year where the reservoirs stay relatively full. I've been trying all morning to get this website to load. Maybe this is one that's been affected by this national issue going on, but the hydromet data, when it comes back up, we're going to show it to you in another video, but for some reason I cannot get it to load right now. But this would be the teacup diagrams for the reservoirs in the Pacific Northwest. So I just showed you some wildfire smoke, and I got a question on the comments yesterday. How do I get that? Well, the website is rapidrefresh.noaa.gov/HRRR/capital HRRR smoke. Okay? What you want to do when you get here is make sure you read what's in red. So this tells us that if you want to see the longer forecasts, you want to use the 0, 6, 12, and 18Z. So I'm recording this. Let's see here. The 12Z is trying to come in right now, so you can see I don't have a lot of data yet. So I'm going to go back to the 6Z run so I can see out 48 hours. And there the website adjusted. And what I do is I come down here to vertically integrated smoke. You can pick on any of these you want, and I click on that check mark right there. And that's what makes the loops that I show you. So hopefully this will load quickly. I'm tethering to my wife's phone out here. So hopefully this will work. My phone wasn't working this morning either. But again, hopefully that was clear how to use this particular website to get the data. So let's see if it's loaded. There it is. And this is a 48-hour forecast of vertically integrated smoke. And again, we're seeing a lot of the western U.S. wildfire plus. Most of this is from the massive Canadian wildfires sinking here into the northern plains of the United States out of the Canadian prairie. Okay, bigger picture. Over the next 14 days, this is a 2-week outlook, not a whole lot has changed. Okay, the only thing that I could tell you is that getting into week 2, I do think that this quarter starts to see more storms. In the meantime, so much of this is dominated by the western U.S. ridge returning and the Bermuda High pumping the moisture in, running into flow coming out of the northwest. And that Bermuda High is strong. Take a look at this. I'm going to go to one of my favorite sites, Tropical Tidbits. When my new site is finished, I'll have this same animation to show you as well. But what I'm going to play for you quickly here is the low-level height field. That's what the high and low pressure is, and the wind field around it. And that is just classic Bermuda High. Can you see it? Let me just take you back again. Watch the placement of this. Look at the flow going around it, which is always clockwise. That's what's keeping the Gulf open. Look at this. And that flow coming around there is just pushing hard and not moving. It's all the way out there into the beginning of August. Now, what are the upper levels doing? Well, here's the ridge today in the west. There's the trough that's diving into the east. As we play through this weekend, it's still there. In fact, this trough gets deeper, and that's what's promoting some of the better rains that we talked about in yesterday's forecast video in the central U.S. Going into Monday and Tuesday, there is a trough finally that sneaks in here by Tuesday into Wednesday in the northwest, knocking temperatures back. That'll open the ridge to the midsection of the country temporarily and warm things up. But as we get out there toward the 26th, 27th, what I'll be very curious about is this. This is when the P&A drops, goes way negative, and that trough comes in. And I've made a comment that I think this is going to not only open this area up to heat, but we know the Bermuda High's pumping the moisture in. What is this going to do in terms of the risk of storms in the midsection of the United States? And if we have a tropical system at that point, none is being forecast, but if something shows up, these are the kind of troughs when you have some southeast ridging that just yank these things right through the Gulf of Mexico. Don't see one now, but just want you to be aware of something we'll be watching in August, September, and October. But as we finish the month of July, which is here, and then get back out into August, once again, we see the troughs diving back to where they've been, the ridging rebuilding over the south and southwest, the Bermuda High in place. And so there's big questions to be answered as to how quickly the pattern recovers after we dive that large trough into the west around the 24th, 25th, 26th, and leave it there, I think, until the start of August. Okay, so what do we do with all of that? Well, the temperature pattern is going to reflect this. The next 5 days, western ridge dominates. That's where the heat is. Much cooler in the central U.S. Day 5 through 10, remember, this starts about, Tuesday, that trough comes in, opens the ridge up with the heat. We're going to start to lose the cooler signal here. By day 10 through 15, now we kind of see the adjustment. In the near term, in terms of severe storms, we're going to watch the plains today, and also we're going to watch the Carolinas and Virginia tomorrow, but not a whole lot of organized large-scale severe weather. This morning we were watching some storms coming out of the northern plains and also some storms down here along the Gulf Coast and southeast. And if we take a look at what the high-res models are suggesting, there's going to be some rain that rolls over the top of the ridge, scattered storm variety here, while tonight, again, the southeast continues to hit a lot of these storms in through this region. This is tonight. Getting into the overnight hours, look at the rain that's coming through the central U.S. by tomorrow morning on Saturday. Sunday, getting to about midday Sunday, that's what our high-res models are suggesting. To look beyond that, first, I want to show you what the high-res NAM is picking up on total precip. So that's a 60-hour forecast from the high-res NAM on total accumulated precip. Just wanted to show you what it was looking at there. I'm doing that so I can compare it to the artificial intelligence, which did show up with a drier signaling through here over the next 7 days. I'll question this given the fact that I think there's going to be storms that show up before this 7-day time period is open. That's going to hit this area, but very wet from Texas to Virginia here with the Bermuda High pumping in that moisture. We can see maybe the better storm activity in the NBM in that area or in the WPC, but they're all reflective of the monsoonal moisture here, the frontal boundary, and the pumping into the Gulf of moisture that's going to roll from Texas to Virginia. Again, all into this area. Good chance of picking up 1 to 2 inches of rain. This is the European model. I'm just going to play it for you to show you how it's adding up the rain. So that's through Monday into Tuesday of next week. And if you just watch this corridor in the model, it does suggest that out there the 24th, 25th, 26th, we start to see, something coming back into this area. And the GFS is on board with it. If you just play this forward, you start to see this increase in activity out there when the pattern breaks down, but certainly the main story is down here for a while. And that's why our latest outlook over the next 10 days on the probability of an inch of rain is very high from Texas to Virginia and all points in between. But it's not as though we're bone dry in this area, as maybe the model suggested. Now in the west, very hot. We're going to have to wait until we get the trough that sneaks in next Tuesday to cool things down in the northwest. But if we just, again, step this up to the probability of 2 inches of rain, very high through this region, and the probability of 4. This is the probability of 4 over the next 10 days. The models have even increased those amounts. Okay, on the week 2 side of things, all of the models have started to increase in this corridor the chances of precipitation. And again, that is when we get the broader troughing over the northwest while the Bermuda High pumps in. And I just think that week 2, that's going to be that last week of July, gets quite stormy for the midsection of the country while the southeast and the south stay stormy as well. That seems to be the mainstay of this pattern as we analyze it going forward. Temperature-wise, here's today's highs. Let's blow that up once. There we go. Very hot in the west, cool in the central and southeast compared to normal. Saturday's another scorcher in the west. We get into Sunday. This is why we have the excessive heat watches and warnings in this area, but much cooler in the central U.S. But remember, by Tuesday, there's the trough and its influence, knocking these temperatures back. That's going to open the ridge by Wednesday more into Montana, into the Canadian prairie. And by next Thursday, it's going to push even farther to the east. And as we saw in the GFS, take a look. We're just going to open that warmth up as we try to finish this month and start August more into the central U.S., with this region staying cooler just on cloud cover and rain around the Bermuda High. Okay, that brings me to the last few slides here. Tropics, still calm over the next 7 days. But looking out there over the next 10, just take note here. We are starting to see some increased activity in these areas that we just have to pay attention to. We're going to wait on this convectively coupled wave right here to get over that part of the Caribbean, the Gulf, and the main development region. But that's still, I think it's beginning of August that finally gets there. But when it does, it's going to have plenty of warm water to interact with. These ocean temperatures are as warm as they typically are in the middle of September, and I do expect there to be quite a bit of tropical activity in the month of August, given that we'll be taking the lid off of the atmosphere with removing that MJO signal that's been suppressing vertical motion there. We'll have to deal with the dust when we get to that point, but one thing to take note of, look how low the vertical wind shear has been. If this stays low, that means any tropical system that shows up will have plenty of favorable environmental conditions to get going. But again, it's not now. It's at least 10 days away from now, maybe more like 20. From there, let's finish this up. I've shown you this many times. This is the ECMWF forecast for the month of August. And again, it's going to come down to a question of a few things. Where's the Four Corners Ridge? How strong is the Bermuda High? And what does the flow look like coming over the top of this? The temperatures, very consistent forecast for August. This looks something like this. What we get to compare that to is the new CPC data. So their outlook for the month of August, just released yesterday, about 30 minutes after I finished recording, looks just like this. And they gave us a new 3-month outlook as well, which is kind of the last one we wait on. And their 3-month outlook, temperature on the left, precipitation on the right, it's very consistent with a lot of the other models. But I want to take you in here. So if you click on the word 3-month outlook, you'll be taken to their actual forecast discussion. And we've looked now at August, September, October. What about fall, though? I'm going to go October, November, December, and I'm going to look at the precipitation forecast. They are very much looking for that La Nina view of things, which is wetter in the northwest. Whoops, sorry, my mic fell over. Drier across the south. I mean, that's a very consistent picture going into fall among all the models. And if we even just go out a little bit farther, well, let's just do it. Why not December, January, February? Yeah, they've got La Nina to the T. Dry from Southern California to South Carolina, super wet in the northwest, deep troughs that dig into the the Ohio Valley. And that's a La Nina forecast if I've ever seen one. So NOAA's putting all their chips in one spot here, saying, hey, I think we're going to be getting La Nina-like features this winter, and their models are showing it. Okay, that was a lot today, but things I'm just thinking about and get us into the weekend, and we'll just pick this back up on Monday. And I'll talk to you then. Thanks.